our device is actually activating a specific frequency in the brain, in particularly 40 hertz frequency, that has been studied for the past 50 years on its impact on various things in terms of cognition, memory, alertness, activation of dopaminergic signaling in the brain.
Crazy.
Mai Nguyen, thanks for joining me on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
So we do interviews with founders all the time, and a lot of them are pre-product, pre-revenue, like very early stage. Of course, some are advanced, but many are early in that process. You're unique in that you've got a product on the market. I believe it's purchasable like today, right? You can go to your website and buy something. So that's cool. And so I want to actually start there, and then we'll back up and talk about how you got here. So I understand it's called EV. It's light therapy. It's a lot of different use cases for it, but I want you to unpack it for us. What is this EV device?
Yeah, so our EV device is a non-invasive light therapy, which also has a combination of sound through our app right now that is direct to consumers. While we're running clinical trials in Alzheimer's patients, we're actually in phase 2 clinical trials, and we've seen positive indication of slowing or stopping of the progression of the disease. And I think I'm a firm believer that if you have something that's non-invasive with minimum side effects, is that clinical trials typically take 5 to 10 years. And right now, especially with Alzheimer's and a lot of the families who are going through the struggles with minor cognitive impairment, it was important for me to have a device onto the market to give individuals an opportunity to potentially help in their own brain function and cognitive health.
What I love about this story is that, people are familiar with light therapy. For many, many years, it's been used for, seasonal affective disorder and, more on the wellness side. And you're coming in, you've got a PhD from Berkeley. You're coming in and you are immediately talking about using it as a therapy for something as complicated as Alzheimer's disease. So talk to me about bridging that gap and coming all the way to an actually effective therapy for a condition that we basically haven't had a therapy for in the past.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get confused in terms of when they look at our device and what we're using as a therapy, is they often say, hey, is it the same as a seasonal light device? And I said, no. Oftentimes, seasonal device is just bright light, which means that they're just stimulating serotonin in the brain. Whereas our device is actually activating a specific frequency in the brain, in particularly 40 hertz frequency, that has been studied for the past 50 years on its impact on various things in terms of cognition, memory, alertness, activation of dopaminergic signaling in the brain. And by understanding this and learning more and more past probably 10 years now, scientists have found that if we can re-entrain this brainwave that is typically observed 15 to 20 years before symptoms arise to decline, we can potentially slow down the degradation of the brain as well as improve brain health prior to even symptoms or cognitive decline. And so understanding that, we utilize light as a way to shine into the eyes and entrain it. It acts sort of like a metronome and a pacemaker for the brain, right? So oftentimes you have these sort of brain waves that are oscillating perfectly like a pacemaker. And as you get older, that sort of get non-functional or decline, which means a lot of your brain function begin to fail. And so for us, understanding that and saying, can we act like an external pacemaker in order to now optimize those brain function and get you back to the clarity and the sharpness and the brain health that you actually have in your earlier days of age? Yeah.
So getting your brain back into the right sort of wavelengths. So 40 hertz light, is that a strobe effect? Is that a blinking? Like what's 40 hertz light like?
Yeah, so typically 40 hertz is very much has a stroboscopic effect, which means it's blinking a lot. What we did and patented with our technology is that we masked that stroboscopic effect while still retaining a 40 hertz frequency in the brain. So basically what it does is that you can Your eyes are very comfortable. It looks sort of like an overhead light setting or a lamp that kind of has a little twinkle, like a star, right? Like I like to tell people that you can tell that there's a slight strobe, but it's not as if you were going into, I like to give this example, during Halloween, if you were going to a horror house, that's sort of what 40 hertz typically looks like. I'm sorry.
Oh, it does?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Nobody wants sort of, blinking fluorescence,
Yeah. It's quite uncomfortable. It can induce headache and nausea in various people, as well as the adherence into the real world is extremely difficult. I would not be able to have my mom sit and mobilize and have something strobing at her for an hour a day, which is typically what is recommended, the usage time of our device, which means that if we're able to apply and develop a technology that actually just looks like a lamp that is next to you and able to just have you don't even have to look at the device. What you can do is have it next to you or in front of you while you're doing work, eating, even on this call with you. I can actually have it next to me and look at you while I'm having my daily dose of brain stimulation.
Okay.
And that's the key here, is that you're not impeding in anyone's daily activity. You're actually integrating it and allowing them to utilize it comfortably in the comfort of their own home.
Are there any side effects to 40 hertz light therapy?
And with our device, in clinical trials, the adverse event, the most that we've seen is that people have a slight headache and dry eyes. With people with glaucoma, of course, they'll have more of a headache because they're light sensitive. So that's the most adverse event that we've seen in our clinical trials.
And how effective do you think this could be? I know you're still proving out some of that research, right?
Yeah.
But, we're talking about just mild impact for some people, or do you think this could be significant?
I do think the earlier that you use the device before even moderate Alzheimer's, the better. I could have potentially, for me, right, this is my opinion, and in all of the research that I'm doing and other people are doing, is that this can potentially impact the way that we treat and prevent Alzheimer's and cognitive health, and even stop people from having Alzheimer's altogether. A lot of times when we think about drug development and the side effects of those with brain bleeding and all those things, I think there's a huge upside and potential to using something that's non-invasive that you don't have to ingest. And at the same time, be able to improve the brain health of these individuals way before you even see the symptoms. So, other things can happen in terms of pathology for like cardiovascular, but I do think the more we understand and the more we utilize something such as brain stimulation, in terms of sound, light, and other usages, the better that our brain can be prolonged in the longevity side.
It's such a gentle ambient therapy that what it makes me think about is sort of the long-term effects. Like I have a light literally pointed right here at me that could be the therapeutic light that I use for a decade before having any, problems cognitively. So what do you think of as those long-term impacts?
Definitely. I think the goal for us is that the more that we can integrate it into systems, into homes, and the earlier that we can educate the public into understanding the impact that it can have. You have that light, like you said, in front of you, rather than having a light that is actually impeding or not doing much. Why not have a light that can potentially impact your brain health later on in life? We had this device released onto the US market for a year now, with over 300 people using it and purchasing the device. And so far, there has been probably 99% people have had positive interactions and impact with it. Again, we have to follow them long term. This is sort of our way also to understand how our device can impact people in the real world. Yeah. And that's also in part to one of the decisions that we made to releasing it on the market.
That's an interesting part of this, that user feedback, because it could be helping people without having an immediate obvious effect. It's hard to gauge that your brain is improving. Just the fact that you remembered a phone number that you thought you would have forgotten otherwise is very subjective, right? And yet it sounds like you are getting sort of a large number of subjective responses.
Yeah. And I think it's not only the individuals themselves, it's typically the family member who notice certain changes, the caretakers, the neurologists who they do go see. And those are the feedback that we're getting, the positive impact that the family members see on the individual's cognitive, mood, sleep, the neurologist seeing the progression of someone who has maybe been diagnosed with minor cognitive impaired, who have used our device, and how long their progression is. And another impact is that we just released our app to have an impact assessment for individuals. So they can actually input and track certain more objective endpoints. And we do hope to utilize that data to educate ourselves and to also build a better system and interacting with the people that we are going to have the device use.
Okay. So right now it's on the market, available as more of a wellness device in terms of like how it's been validated. What are the next steps in terms of FDA or whatever you're going to try to do next?
So our next steps is that as we are learning more as a direct-to-consumer market, we're working side by side with FDA. We would like to have a 510K submission so that we can offer the device as a research device, as well as we are finishing up our phase 2 clinical trials, hopefully by the end of this year, to give us more data, and then enter a phase 3 in 2026. Which will then allow us to get the full FDA approval, hopefully, after the trial.
Very nice. Well, let's shift gears for a minute. I want to hear a bit more about you and your founder journey. I mentioned that you got your PhD at Berkeley. I'm curious to know if you've always been an inventor. This is obviously, you're bringing something new to the market, the work that you did at Berkeley, new types of research. Kind of what was that journey like?
Well, yeah, I did my undergraduate at Berkeley in microbiology. So no, I was not always an inventor. I came in, wanting to actually go to medical school, because I wanted to do something that was impactful, that helped individuals. But then the more that I got started in a research lab, studying, reproductive function and also circadian rhythm in animal models. And then understanding that and taking it on and starting getting into the neuroscience side and looking at organizational, activational phases in the brain in grad school. Growing up, being an engineer or inventor was not something that an Asian family does. Typically, they want you to be a lawyer or a doctor. So I actually didn't discover sort of the innovation and engineering side until I started sort of expanding outside of my research lab and going into sort of a innovation lab at Cal. So they have what's called the invention lab at Berkeley. And so I started getting involved in learning more about that, but also understanding that my parents were getting older. I wanted to see how I can take what I'm learning in grad school and apply it to something more that I can deliver commercialization wise or have impact in humans rather than animal models. I mean, we all have to start somewhere in animal models, but I think the sort of integrative and community side of Berkeley allowed me to explore sort of and discover my understanding of how I can utilize, the tools are all available, and then also apply my background training to start this company,
Yeah. What was it like transitioning into being a CEO after spending all that time in research? Those are different types of roles.
Yeah, I can honestly tell you that learning curve is exponential, right? And I can tell you that for most people who want to start a company and run a company, you need to understand that there's an economic side of pain and stress that is involved. Typically, you're a scientist, you get steered towards going into academia, like going to become a professor. And I think that transition to a CEO was a huge learning curve for me, because also speaking more in layman terms to individuals about, the science that we're doing, understanding culture, how to manage a team, how to run a business. That's not something that's taught to a scientist. We know how to run a lab and an assay. But I do think it's been a difficult but also very enjoyable experience for me in particular, because I got to learn from a lot of people.
What were some of the things that you did in order to get that education quickly?
Had to be very humble and ask a lot of people for help. Also knowing when to say, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing, and accepting that having people giving you the grace that it's your first time doing something. And I think that was something that I had to learn as most scientists, we want to be the best at everything. And I'm not. I'm just learning and humbly trying to get mentors. So
how did that shape the way that you built your core team, which is such an essential part of any startup?
Yeah, my core team, surprisingly, is also in Denmark. We started the company in Denmark. So that culture shock of, not only going to being an entrepreneur from a scientist perspective, but also going to another country that is not the US, it doesn't run the same way. I think I took a lot of what I've learned through the diversity of Berkeley, but also through my family and my learning in terms of how I want to be treated in order to ensure that everyone had the same mission and vision. And it's not about, at the end of the day, where we're going to go and how fast we're going to go, but how much learning and how much we can actually lean on each other in the tough times. People say this all the time, fail fast and act fast.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you have to slow down in order to see a clearer picture.
Yeah.
And it's okay, and those who jump on and actually help you are going to understand that you sometimes aren't going to be successful overnight. It's a lot of struggle. So, yeah.
Yeah. I feel like that's the researcher coming out. You're like, some things take time. Sometimes good things take time. Tell us more about the Danish connection, because we haven't talked about that yet.
Yeah. So, in my third year of grad school, I met Jes Berling, who is also my co-founder. He was doing a visit here at Cal as a visiting professor. And he was giving a talk about blue light. And I just came up to him and said, I do blue light in terms of circadian rhythm and aging and reproduction. And we grabbed coffee, and he brought up some research on 40 hertz strobe light. And I said, that's impossible to apply to the real world and to the aging population, especially with the agitation and mood that often exhibited in individuals who have sundowning and all those things. Yeah. And he asked me, what would I do differently? So understanding the vision and eyes really well in the brain, I said, well, if we can develop a technology that masks and overlay the signaling, which is not an easy task. Right? It is not an easy task at all. And then activate not the rods and cones in your eyes, but the ganglion cells, and still stimulate the brain. And then you'll have a product that you can apply into the real world. And this is coming from a scientist, just explaining myself. He said, let's patent that. Like the day after I met the man, he said, let's patent it. And I'm a scientist, and I'm like, what is a patent? One. But he guided me and helped me. And then maybe like a week later, he was like, I think this could be something big. Would you like to come to Denmark in the summer and meet two of my engineers who can potentially help you build this? Again, I just met this guy. So I said, one, I don't know what Denmark is. I'm sorry, being the American that I am. And two, no, I don't know you very well, but it was all about being open to taking risks. And I said, if this can work, if we can build this together with my background and the engineer's background, because their background is in photonics, which is light, right? And so I left. I asked my professor for permission to leave for the summer. And that's what we did all summer. And sort of, what
an awesome ride. I mean, you had the right ideas and research at the right moment to link up with the right person who has that photonics engineering background to bring it to life. What was it like? Tell me about the moment when you actually emerged from that process with something that could actually work. A bit of that eureka moment.
Well, it was a really long journey for us. We had to develop something that no one's developed before. Even the chip that we developed, there was none that was sold that had the drivers that we needed in order to mix the colors. So building that took a really long time. But we knew that we can't make it perfect, and it was just a proof of concept. So I went back and forth from Denmark and California, probably for about a year and a half, literally trying to develop this technology, brought in more Danish partners and master students and PhD students to help us build this out. One of the beauties of collaborating with a Danish institution is that they were all in. They gave us a 500,000 crown, which is about $75,000, $80,000 to try to work on this project as students, to build the device out. And then also they gave us partnerships with the hospitals.
Nice.
And the radiologists and the nurses all volunteered their time and machines, which typically it's extremely expensive to use an MRI machine and an EEG machine. And so I think it all goes back to community, right? Who you surround yourself with, the individuals that understand your mission and vision and able to help you in the hardest time, which is just to start something.
That's beautiful. And you feel like that came partially from the sort of Danish culture that they were a part of there.
Yeah, I think it's the Danish culture, but it's also the network that we had. Like Jess was the director of entrepreneurship at DTU. And so he was hugely a part of being able to talk to people and get them to understand. And then I think it's all about also telling a story as to how this can change the way we live and change the way that we actually treat and prevent such a challenging disease. Okay? And then I think that was what I think every time we talk to somebody, they had a family member or an individual who have experienced someone going through cognitive decline, whether it's Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's. And I think that is what got people to buy in to saying, if I can only do my little part in changing this, I'm going to help in any way possible. And I think that's what triggered it, right?
Very nice. Very nice. Well, for a final question, since you have something on the market right now, I want to give you the final word to say, what would you hope that someone listening to this, how they would take action? Are you hoping they would check out the product on the website, give you feedback in some way? What would you like to hear?
Yeah, for me, it's all about having more and more people educated and understanding the impacts of what our device can have, but also feedback. Whether you're a neurologist, psychologist, or even someone with a family member, or you yourself is going through something like this, connect with us, talk to us, try to understand how we can potentially help you with our product. We're not selling a product just to have you shelf it. We're selling a product to have you understand how it can impact you and your loved ones, but also to learn how we can improve and change our device for betterment of the future.
And just to be clear, I could theoretically buy it for myself and I might experience some sort of benefits from it, or do I need to have some decline of some kind?
No, you can use it now. I use it every day. I've had people and clients who have purchased the device, not because they have cognitive decline, but because they want better sleep, because they want better mental acuity, or even if they just want more alertness and just feel better in general. And that's what we're trying to target, is changing the way that your mind and brain and sort of mentally how you feel, preventing you from actually having all that information and stress in your brain. Is the earlier that you're able to do that, the better it is for your brain later on in life.
What effects do you feel from it? You say you use it every day.
Yeah, I feel super alert and I'm very concentrated when I use it. So for jumping from task to task, I do feel an improvement. I travel a lot. So for me, it's all about the sleep and the mood, and being able to be very sharp in the way that I think and answer questions. Okay. But I also think my memory, because I travel a lot, I am circadian disrupt, which means I lack sleep. And as we all know, with cognitive decline, sleep is one of the most important things. So I do sleep better when I use it more. I do miss it when I travel and I don't have it along with me. But again, that's also my own personal opinion. You're welcome to go onto our website. We have a lot of individuals who have graciously volunteered their sort of story and told and talked about how they've experienced using the device and why they use it in the first place.
Well, Mai, appreciate you taking the time with me. This is a fascinating product and work that you're doing. So fascinating that something so sort of ambient and mild with such low risk, basically zero, could have a serious therapeutic effect for something as difficult as Alzheimer's. So really two ends of that spectrum, easy and ambient and, a high impact target. So really excited to see where you guys head in next year.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time, Logan, to get to know us and you in particular and the product. Do hope to connect with you more often too.
All right. Take care and be well.
All right. Thank you.
Now, before we get into that, a quick word about this show, in case you're new around here. At Startup Health, we believe in broadcasting the stories of Health Moonshot progress, the stories of the most forward-thinking entrepreneurs in health. If you want more of this good news about healthcare's problem solvers, make sure that you subscribe to our channel, hit that notification button, and follow us on social media at Startup Health.